nobody's going to be held accountable in the sense that you may mean it, unless it's the executive branch enforcing it. There was a criminal referral on Lois Lerner by a committee of Congress. Ways and Means referred the matter to the United States Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice, for criminal prosecution, and it got nowhere. So, anyone wonders whether or not, who was it that said there are consequences to elections?
How do you choose between your children?
There are.
You know, during the IRS scandal, you famously said with Lois Lerner, quote, the same Constitution that allows her the right, if she wants to sit there and say nothing, allows these groups the right to petition their government for redress. And I think you made an interesting point that freedom of speech protects everyone.
We don't have no justice system.
It's not conservative. It's not liberal. It's not who holds the executive branch. It's bigger than that. And even some of that speech that's unpopular is still protected. And we talked about how the ACLU has defended free speech. Sometimes it's not popular, whether it's defending communists or flag burners, which, by the way, CVA does not support at all. But we understand that the defense of that unpopular speech is so important, so they don't come after our own personal speech. Why is it so important to defend this unpopular speech in your opinion?
I don't know if it was Reinhold Niebuhr or who it was that said, you know, first they came after the trade unions, but there were no trade unions. I wasn't a trade unionist, so I didn't object. And then they came after the Catholics, and I wasn't a Catholic, so I didn't object. And then they came after the Jewish community, but I wasn't Jewish, so I didn't object. And then they came after me, and there was no one left to object. It's very different. Look, I may disagree on what's defined as speech and what's not. Reasonable minds can differ on, you know, what's defined as speech. What there can never be a difference of opinion on is that you should have the right to say things that I fundamentally disagree with. The government should not censor it based on the content of the speech. Because today, the sun may shine on me, but it's not going to shine that way all the time. Tomorrow, they may want to censor what I'm saying. So it is best, look, we're going to disagree on what is defined as speech. But you should have the right, and I should zealously defend your right to say crazy, wrong things. I can argue that nobody should listen to you, and I would argue that. Very different from me arguing government should keep you from saying. What I found most, just not most, because there were a lot to choose from in the IRS targeting scandal, I really had hoped some of my colleagues on the other side would have seen this more as a speech issue and less as a political issue. Because if the IRS can target people based on their political orthodoxy, then can the Department of Agriculture under a Republican administration reward people based on their political orthodoxy? I mean, once government starts rewarding people based on that, our republic is just, it's finished, it's gone. So I did note the irony of Ms. Lerner reading a statement and then claiming she wasn't going to answer any questions because she did waiver.
Was that just an off-the-cuff statement?
You know what? I slept through most of con law, but I do remember this little. I mean, I was a prosecutor for 16 years. It'd be great if you could testify I did not rob the bank. And by the way, I'm not going to answer any of the prosecutor's questions about why my fingerprints are on the demand note, why I'm on the video surveillance, and why you found the money in my bedroom. I'm not going to answer any of those questions. I'm just going to tell you I didn't do it. The world isn't wired that way. So for her to say I did nothing wrong, but I'm not going to answer any of your questions, you can't do that in the courtroom. I do. I felt so.
Merriweather, for all your private security needs. How can I help?
All they wanted to do was
Thank you. A helicopter has been dispatched to your area.
She had a bunch of high-priced lawyers to remind her she didn't have to say anything. The irony of her hiding behind the Fifth Amendment while she sought to discriminate against groups that wanted to educate other people about their freedom.
We are here to help. Latest whoever's giving you trouble.
With that particular point. So, but she's gone. She's retired, and because the executive branch saw no criminal conduct without sanction.
there seems to be a really disturbing trend that the government is bigger and bigger and more powerful. And the shift of balance is leaving us, we the people, and going to these government bureaucrats where they have no problem prosecuting us and sending us to jail. But people that, just because they're a government employee, they're protected. How can we shift that balance? Is it just the executive branch, as you mentioned, or is it a longer-term type of initiative?
Well, not to put the 4 or 5 people who are still awake asleep, also, by using the phrase constitutional equilibrium, it's out of whack. The legislative branch has surrendered, frankly, the biggest tool we have, which is appropriations. Our framers gave us appropriations. We just passed another CR/omnibus in December. So we've surrendered our ability to hold people accountable with appropriations. The Senate has advice and consent. We'll see how and in what way they use that next year. So the equilibrium among the branches is out of whack. The executive branch is more powerful than the other two right now. And if you want to hold people accountable in the way that most people in the audience think hold accountable, they think go to jail. You said go to jail. All right? There's only one branch of government that can put anybody in jail. It's the executive branch. And you can't make them do it. I disagree with Comey's conclusions, but there's nothing I can do other than hold a hearing and tell you I disagree with Comey's conclusions. I can't overrule them. A little bit of it is the out of whack equilibrium. A lot of it is our framers, I don't think, ever envisioned government to be the size that it is. So what I would tell my friends to do, the people I work for in this district, is whenever you hear something proposed, ask yourself, first of all, is it a good idea? Is it an idea for which the government should be involved? And if the answer to both of those is yes, at what level? At what level? We're focused on the First Amendment tonight, 9th and 10th. Powers that are not given to the federal government belong to you, the people, and then they belong to the states in the 10th Amendment. What's wrong with the state implementing a good idea? What's wrong with Granville County implementing a good idea? Federal government is so big. That's why people are fearful of challenging it. That's why it appears as if the playing field is not level. It's not. The federal government is gigantic. And if you're trying to weigh and balance, look, I'm a CIA contractor. I'm a Department of State contractor. I'm a DOD contractor. And I want to let people know that this is going on and this is wrong. You're taking on something that just seems overwhelming. What I will tell people is this. I don't want to brag on Jason Chaffetz or Ron Johnson in the Senate side, but there are people that you can go to and not be retaliated against. But unless you know that and trust it, I wonder how many people remain silent for fear of...
Hey, boss, I guess that one's not going in the warehouse. Log back onto SecureSurf here at the office if you want to try another one.
Optimistic, right after 2016, that conservatives have the executive branch and the legislative branch. Does that also make you uncertain as well, or nervous, whether it goes from all the way to the left to the right, supermajorities in either party?
I am cautiously optimistic under a theory that winning elections has consequences. I did not come up with that phrase, somebody else did, but it's still true. Winning elections has consequences. The president-elect will make judicial appointments subject to advice and consent. It's a beautiful system if we ever decided to fully use it. It's a beautiful system our framers gave us. The Senate can weigh in. The House controls appropriations. The executive branch. There are limits on all of the branches if everyone does their job. What I'm really most optimistic about is, you've heard me for 6 years now complain that the executive branch is too powerful. But every time I say that, our friends, not to go back to that media question, but my friends in the media will say, well, that's just political. That's just a crazy Republican congressman that doesn't like this administration. And I kept saying, I hope I live long enough to provide oversight over a Republican executive branch. I would say the exact same thing. I would ask the same questions. I've lived long enough. Hopefully, if I can make it to January 20th, I will have lived long enough It's not a political fight to me. It is a constitutional, not quarrel, but constitutional analysis. Is the legislative branch going to stick up for itself? Is the judicial branch going to have the humility to say, you know what? We don't get to decide what the law is. We interpret it. We don't make it. We don't find liberty rights that nobody else has found for the last 250 years. There has to be a resetting of the equilibrium, and I'm afraid the best way to do it is with one party providing oversight over its very own party. If I were to send a subpoena to, I'm going to pick my friend Ryan Zinke, who's going to be the new Secretary of Interior. He just made me travel for 5 days in Montana on his RV with him driving, primarily in the emergency lane, because he fell asleep. Well, let's assume I wanted to provide oversight over Ryan Zinke. Number one, he's a friend. Number two, we're in the same party. It's viewed differently by you. It's not viewed as political. It's viewed as constitutional if we're doing it to ourselves. This is a unique opportunity to reset the constitutional equilibrium. So I'm excited. Here's what we can't do. You can't do it in the courtroom, and you can't do it in politics. You got to under-promise and over-perform. Do not tell people, it's what we did in 2010, it's what we did in 2014, which is why everybody is mad. We overpromised and underperformed. We set your expectations up here, and the delivery was down here. So I'm setting expectations really.
You're through to your garage. You need me to bring you a ride?
I'll
bring it to you.
I want you to be surprised. That's where I'm setting expectations. Then when we begin to do good things, you'll say, you know what? You know what? They actually kept their word. And slowly but surely, trust will begin to be rebuilt. Hopefully. That's my thought.
I'd like to close with a question about something really important you said to a young group of liberty lovers. You told them, quote, "You are the messenger that's going to change the world. I'm not asking you to be a Ronald Reagan or Abraham Lincoln. I'm asking you to live a quiet life of conviction and virtue and actually live out what you profess to believe. If you can do that, you will be a leader. You will be persuasive. And your generation will be the one that gets our country back on the right path. What can we do as individuals to preserve and protect this freedom of speech in America like you talked about?"
Well, I'll just try to get through this without getting emotional, because it is emotional flying into an airport named for Reagan, a city named for Washington, and you got monuments out the left-hand side of the window. And when you made the grades I made in high school, you never thought you'd ever be going to work in Congress. You never thought you'd be flying into Washington. And for the first 6 months, you get overwhelmed with the history out this side of the airplane. Jefferson, Madison, Lincoln, Reagan, all the big names of the past. And it takes a little while, but ultimately you start looking at
The supplies we're after are being moved by a Merryweather convoy. Intercept at the point marked on your GPS and bring them back to the bunker.
And most of us can't name very many people who were there. So my question to you is, who built the country? The names you know or the names you don't? To me, it's the names you don't. That's the ones who volunteered to go fight. Those are the ones that have preserved and defended all of the rights you and I have been discussing. Yes, I'm thankful for those big leaders whose names we all learned in history.
Fuck them, them lying bastards. All them were nothing but slave owners and rapists and pedophiles.
Quiet lives of virtue. So what I try to say
fucking founding fathers.
Don't wait on
I
me
didn't be
to
some
do it.
founding fathers
Don't
when
wait
the
on
people
Tim
was already
Scott,
here.
no matter how great
And
he
bitches
is.
lived
Don't
in
wait
and
on
killed all
whatever
fucking
president
people, you
you
dirty
think is going to
bastards.
come in and fix whatever you think is wrong. That is not the story of our country. The story of our country, nameless, selfless, average, everyday Americans leading lives of virtue and conviction. That's what made us the greatest experiment in self-governance the world will ever know. And that's the outside, that is the other side of the window. Those are the names we don't know. So, it's y'all, it's not us.
people and not telling the truth about shit. But if we lie in court, we go to jail. We live there and say that we ain't answering no motherfucking questions.
There are nothing but empty seats and no television cameras. Somewhere today, those selected to sit in judgment of their fellow citizens will be told that they must wait until the very last witness testifies and the last piece of evidence has been introduced before they can even begin.
Hello, you're through to Meriwether Security Consulting. What can I do for you?
So if our
An air team is on its way to you.
be impartial and free of bias, and if our fellow citizens must wait until the last piece of evidence is
You there? Okay, they're almost on you. Stop the convoy and get the supplies back to the bunker.
Before they can reach a verdict, a conclusion, an outcome, then I don't think it's asking too much that the Department of Justice and the FBI do the same thing. There is no member of Congress.
Okay, show us who's annoying you.
The Bureau in higher esteem than I do. There are others who hold you in high esteem, but I would take second place to no one. And I have defended the department and the Bureau when, frankly, it was pretty damn lonely to do so. When my Democrat friends were asking that Jim Comey be prosecuted for a Hatch Act violation about this time last year, they now want him canonized. But this time last year, they wanted him prosecuted for a Hatch Act violation. When your predecessor sat right where you're sitting, it was embroiled in a fight with this little tiny startup company called Apple, I was on the side of the Bureau. When there are calls for special counsel, even today, I reject them because I trust the women and men of the Department of Justice and the Bureau, the professionals that we hired to do their job. And the vast majority of line prosecutors and line agents are exactly what you described in your opening statement. They are exactly what you described. But unfortunately, the last 2 years have not been good years for the Bureau, and they have not been good years for the department. We had an Attorney General meet with the spouse of a target of an investigation on the tarmac and asked that an investigation be called something other than an investigation, but be called a matter. We've had an Attorney General recuse himself from the largest, most significant investigation.
And we're done. Heading back to base.
We had the director of the FBI appropriate a major charging decision away from the Department of Justice because he was concerned that the public wouldn't have confidence if the Department of Justice handled that decision themselves. We had an FBI director write 2 politically volatile letters weeks before an election. We had an FBI director memorialize conversations he had with the President of the United States because he didn't trust the President's recall of those conversations. And I think what frustrates some folks is when Director Comey wanted special counsel for President Trump, he leaked one of those memos. When he didn't have confidence in Loretta Lynch, he didn't hear a word about it. There were no leaks that prompted special counsel when he didn't trust Loretta Lynch. There were leaks when he decided he didn't trust President Trump. We've had an acting AG fired, had the director of the FBI fired. And we can't manage to find prosecutors who haven't donated to presidential candidates. Out of all the universe of prosecutors that you used to work with, and I used to work with, and Johnny Ratcliffe used to work with, we can't find a dozen that haven't donated to major political candidates. And now we have Special Agent Strzok. It was the Inspector General, not the Department of Justice, not the Bureau who found these texts. It was the Inspector General. And I share your confidence in his objectivity. I share it. But it shouldn't have been the Inspector General that had to bring this to our attention 12 months after it happened. And that same agent is the one who reportedly interviewed Secretary Clinton in an interview that you and I have never seen conducted that way before. To have potential witnesses and potential targets sit in on a witness interview, I appreciate your professionalism and your unwillingness to want to say how unprecedented that is, so I'm not going to ask you. I'll just tell you, it's unprecedented. And that same agent is alleged to have been the one that changed the language. You're right, they are synonyms. Extremely careless is a synonym for grossly negligent, which begs the question, why change it?
Yeah.
But you and I know why it was changed. It was changed because the statute says grossly negligent. And if you're not going to charge someone, God knows you don't want to track the statute with the language that you use. That would be stupid. What's also stupid is to do that memo 2 months before you've interviewed the target. That memo was drafted before the last witness was interviewed. Director, it was drafted before the target of the investigation was even interviewed. Which makes people wonder, was the decision made before the interviews were finished? And now we believe that that same agent is also involved in the investigation into President Trump and his campaign. They have interviewed Michael Flynn, that hasn't been confirmed, and we don't know what role, if any, he took in the preparation of documents for court filing. So I'm going to say this because I'm out of time, and I appreciate the chairman's patience with me. You have a really important job. When all else fails in this country, we want to be able to look to the FBI. We want to be able to look to the Department of Justice. All the other institutions we trust, including Congress, appear to be broken.
They got motherfuckers in there that kill people.
It's been a really bad 2 years. I am counting on you to help answer our question in Congress, our fellow citizens' questions, but I am more than anything counting on you to go back to work for that blindfolded woman holding a set of scales. It really doesn't give a whit about politics. That's the FBI that I want.
Now, the gentleman has expired. Director is going to respond. Just a 30-second response. First, let me say, Congressman Gowdy, I'm well aware of your long-standing support for the Bureau and the Department, and I want you to know we appreciate it. And second, I want to assure you and every other member of this committee that there is no scenario under which I would have taken the President's nomination if I were not committed to the kind of independent, impartial, objective, and professional pursuit of the facts. I wouldn't be here if I weren't committed to that. I can give this committee that commitment. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Ray, for being here. My background, I was a former prosecutor, as a judge for 22 years. During that time in the criminal courts, I had always thought that the FBI had a stellar reputation. In the last few years here in Congress, I don't have that belief any longer. And I think your predecessor did a lot to damage the reputation of the FBI. I don't think that the FBI has come back around with that stellar reputation. And that's unfortunate. You gave us lots of statistics in the opening statement that you made about what the FBI is doing. I want to talk about FISA. Secret courts issuing secret warrants, supposedly to go after terrorists overseas. A recent Washington Post article made the comment or stated that when information is seized on bad guys, there's the so-called seizure of information that belongs to Americans, inadvertent, as it's called by the legal community. And in that database are Americans and non-Americans. In the Washington Post article, quote, says many of them in this database were Americans. 90% of the account holders whose communications were collected under 702 were not the intended targets. And about half of the surveillance files were on Americans. So you have this database that's supposed to go after the bad guys, and you get that information, but inadvertently you pick up all of this information on Americans who have nothing to do with terrorism. How many times has this database been queried, I call the word searched, to find out if there are identifiers on Americans? How many times has the FBI or the intelligence agency or government done that?
Congressman, I don't have numbers for you here today. I will tell you that the database that we're talking about is not bulk collection on anyone, first. Number two, it is a database of foreigners reasonably believed to be located overseas for foreign intelligence purposes. That's what's collected by the NSA.
I may interrupt.
The FBI.
I'm claiming my time. But I'm talking about the inadvertent seizure of information based on this idea we're going after terrorists. How many people have been queried, searched in that big database? That's my question.
And Congressman, I don't have the statistics for you. I can give you one number that may be helpful to you in answering your question, which is that of what the NSA collects, that the FBI only receives, much less queries against, about 4.3% of what the NSA collects. And the individuals that are incidentally collected, the U.S. person information that incidentally collected, are people who are in communication with foreigners who are the subject of foreign intelligence investigation. So like an ISIS recruiter, there's a U.S. person picked up. That person would have been in email contact, for example, with an ISIS recruiter.
Understand. I'm talking about terrorism. I'm talking about the inadvertent where there's a communication with an American, and that American's information is seized and then later searched by whether it's the intelligence community or the FBI. Washington Post said 90% of those seizures were on non-terrorists. Do you agree or disagree with that statistic?
I haven't reviewed the Washington Post article.
This committee has asked for a long time to give us that information because we are now coming up with FISA reauthorization. My opinion is that the FBI and the intelligence service is back-walking that information because FISA comes up at the end of this year, and then Congress would just reauthorize it without knowing how many Americans are searched. The right of privacy in the Fourth Amendment is guaranteed. I'm sure you believe this, but it is being abused and stolen by government in this situation on what's happening to Americans. And the search of that database, whether it's the first query, which is a search, or a later specific search of that communication, is being done in secret by our government, and that Congress, Judiciary Committee, is entitled to that information. And I will disagree with what you said about, well, it's classified. I can't tell you that. That's ridiculous. Congress is entitled, members of Congress are entitled to every classified piece of information that is in your possession. That is our position. That is our right as members of Congress. So government can't have classified information and say, we're not going to tell you because it's classified. We're entitled to it in some type of setting. So I totally disagree with you on that. I hope you can provide us that information before we reauthorize FISA. Otherwise, I'm going to vote against FISA. Now I'll go back to the chairman.
Mr. Chairman, may I briefly respond?
The director may respond.
First off, as to classified information, we are engaged with the intelligence committees, and we share classified information with intelligence committees all the time. And then under certain circumstances, as the chairman noted, we are also sharing classified information with the authorizing committees, like the two judiciary committees. As to the question of abuses, every court to have looked at the way
the lab thinks there's some mileage in breaking down a technical pickup with a minigun on the back. There's a high screw with the requisite. You've just got to get it off of them.
As has the Independent Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. And there has been no abuse found in the 702 program despite oversight by the Inspector General, multiple sections of oversight within the executive branch, oversight by the federal FISA court, and oversight by the intelligence community.
And I disagree with the secret courts on their interpretation of the Fourth Amendment, as does many other members of Congress. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, thanks, gentlemen. This time has expired. I just want to reiterate, as with the other request, this is a reasonable request by the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Ray, for being here. My background,
Congresswoman, I think I'm not comfortable trying to discuss the specific victim engagements in a particular investigation, at least in this setting. But I think what I can tell you, which might be helpful in response, is that we have very well-established criteria and policies and procedures for questions of victim notification in cyber matters. And the questions and I probably can't repeat them to you verbatim, but I can give you the gist of them. The questions go to things like, number one, can we identify the victim? Which in a lot of cases is harder than you might think. Number two, is the information that we have at that point in the investigation actionable for the victim? Is there something they can do with it? You know, could sharing the information actually protect somebody, prevent a loss, etc.? We also look at whether or not sharing the information at the time that we have, in question, would potentially compromise or jeopardize an existing investigation or reveal sources and methods, which is often the case in these kinds of investigations. And the last point I guess I would make is that when you have a large number of people, it's much easier for us to provide victim notification when we have official or government or corporate accounts where we can contact the Chief Information Security Officer and then they can communicate to all the people who are on that server. When you talk about Gmail accounts and things like that, it gets a lot harder because a lot of people's Gmail addresses don't have, Ray, C-W-R-A-Y or,
Right, but for example, and I assume if what you're describing is the current practice, when the Democratic National Committee was hacked by the Russians, the FBI contacted an intern. They never contacted the chairman of the DNC. She found out, months later. So hopefully,
Merriweather, because security is a private matter. What can I do for you?
I think the
Your Merriweather Air Team is on its way.
Remain the same, and the procedures themselves, I think, are pretty sound. The question of, but if you think about what they are questions that the investigators have to ask in each victim notification context.
Let me go. When
We're here
had
now.
The Attorney General here recently, there's an ongoing effort to hack into the election system. We know that from various reports. And the Attorney General said really nothing was going on if he hadn't been able to pay. I'm paraphrasing. He was saying it's really important we haven't spent enough time on it. I'm getting the sense that that's true across the government. In fact, we've got systems that were hacked within a half an hour at DEFCON by state voting systems. What is the FBI doing relative to preserving the integrity of the voting structure itself for the next election?
Mr. Chairman, may I answer that one? Yes. Thank you. Well, I think the FBI is actually very focused on this subject. It's one of the things that I've tried to insist on upon arriving. We have a foreign influence task force that we stood up that brings together both our counterintelligence division, our cyber division, and our criminal division, as well as some other parts of the Bureau. We are in coordination through that task force with DHS, which of course has responsibility for a lot of the election infrastructure, along with states. We are in contact with our foreign partners because, as you know, efforts to interfere with elections are occurring in other countries as well. And so that by doing that with our close relationship with our foreign counterparts, we learn more about tradecraft methods and things like that. So we're acutely focused on looking out for signs of interference in the 2018 or 2020 elections.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I know my time is up, but I hope that there's an effort by the Bureau to communicate with election officers who oftentimes have
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Ray, a couple of questions. One is one that I'm sure you're aware of, and I'm just going to ask it as a do you agree, and it's not hypothetical, but it's non-specific. Do you agree that persons should not have their assets forfeited without due process and a provable link to criminal activity?
Well, Congressman, it's been a while since I looked at the law on asset forfeiture, so I want to be careful not to...
This is a constitutional, not a statute.
Well, I believe that in the context of asset forfeiture, we should respect the Constitution.
Okay, so it's fair to say that if somebody has $10,000 in their van, they have it taken from them, and they have to sue to get it back, even though they're never charged with a crime. That would be wrong under due process in the Constitution.
Well, again, I'm not trying to make this difficult, but to me, asset forfeiture questions raise all kinds of complicated case law questions about due process, etc. But I do believe due process and adherence to the Constitution are incredibly important in the asset forfeiture context as in elsewhere.
Thank you, Director. Now, switching to the matter of Peter Strzok, and I had a long time working with your folks on the personnel side over at Oversight, where we oversee a lot of those things, and I just want to make the record straight now that you're, in addition to being the chief from a law enforcement standpoint, you're also sort of the ultimate head of HR for those tens of thousands of people who are working so hard for us. Is an FBI agent allowed to have a political opinion?
Yes.
Is an FBI agent allowed to communicate that political opinion to their wife or even their mistress?
Yes.
So nothing in a text simply communicating a political opinion would be cause for firing or any other action under the ordinary rules of the FBI or any federal person, correct?
I think each question would have to be based on its own circumstances. Certainly, I can imagine situations, as you're describing, where it wouldn't be, and I can imagine situations where it might be.
Well, so that brings us to a situation now in which an individual is key to the question of whether or not there should be a full de novo review of the FBI's actions as to Hillary Clinton and the decision not to prosecute her, since he was actively involved in that. So my question to you is, since it's clear that whatever Peter Strzok did was sufficient to have him relieved, something that in the ordinary course of simply communicating a political opinion would not cause that and would be inappropriate to relieve somebody simply for having a political opinion, will you make available to this committee, upon the chairman's obvious request, the ability to see any or all of those 10,000 texts sufficient to understand why this individual was dismissed and how it might be relevant to the question of the objectivity of Director Comey's investigation and conclusions?
Well, there's a couple parts to your question, if I might. First, I want to be clear that the individual in question has not been dismissed.
What happened was, but he's been relieved from the duties he had, and he's now in HR.
He was reassigned away from the Special Counsel investigation, which is different than disciplinary action. Second, as to the question of access to the text messages, we'd be happy to try to work with the committee on that. I want to be sensitive to the fact that there is an active, very active, outside independent investigation by the Inspector General, and the last thing I want to do, and I think the last thing this committee would want to do, would somehow compromise or interfere with that. So we'll have to go through a process to assess how we can be sensitive to those operational considerations, while at the same time, as we should be responsive to Congress and this committee and its oversight responsibility.
Would the gentleman yield on that?
Of course I yield to Chairman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. We have been in communication with the Inspector General. We very much respect the investigation that is taking place there. And we have asked the Department of Justice, and through them, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, for all of the 1.2 million documents that have been provided to the Inspector General, minus those that relate to any particular ongoing grand jury investigation. Now, I have received back from the...
Nice work. Your technicians are already breaking that down.
Mr. Boyd, a letter indicating that they will make a fulsome response to that request. So I would like, following up with Mr. Ice's question, to hear you tell us that you will also provide us with that honoring of that fulsome request, because most of those documents that the department has committed to provide are coming from the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Certainly, I don't mean to suggest that we wouldn't be fully responsive.
When I hear arms are moving around the state at the behest of hostile governments, it upsets me, okay? You're going to get in a buggy, bring down these shipments, and collect cargo. I'm going to make some tea.
Doing something on in terms of unintended consequences with ongoing investigations, but we have no desire to frustrate the very legitimate oversight requests of this committee.
Mr. Chairman, yield for a moment.
Yes, I yield.
Thank you. I just want to ask the director, can this kind or does this kind of document request of the Inspector General on an ongoing investigation, could it interfere with that investigation? Is it proper to respond fulsomely? I mean, what are the limitations here?
Well, I think a lot of that requires, as the chairman referenced, us to make sure that we are touching base with the Inspector General, since it's his investigation and not ours. If the Inspector General is comfortable with the information being provided and that it's not going to interfere with or impede his investigation, then that's one very, very significant consideration that can be put to the side. So I can commit that our staff will work with the Justice Department staff and your staff to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to be responsive, while at the same time making sure that we're not in some way jeopardizing or compromising an ongoing investigation or revealing something about a grand jury matter or anything like that.
We asked for it minus grand jury material. Obviously, it takes some time to do that. Mr. Boyd committed to a date of January 15, and he's going to require your cooperation. So we want to have your assurance that that cooperation in meeting that date will be forthcoming. We would tend to follow up with further letters on clarifying this, but it's very important that we have this information very quickly. The Inspector General is completely cooperative with us in his investigation, but they're not his documents. They are the FBI and the Department of Justice documents, so the request is not directed to him, it's directed to the department, and we need to have full response.
We intend to be fully cooperative with both this committee and the Inspector General.
I robbed the gentleman from California of a bit of his time, so I'm going to have to say I yield that.
I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman.
Yield it to you, but the gentleman's recognized for an additional minute.
Thank you. Director, at this time, as far as you know, you're not asserting or believe there's any privilege as to those documents. Is that correct?
Well, I haven't reviewed the however many million documents that...
I'm only saying that at this time you know of no privilege.
I'm not aware of it, but I really haven't asked the question yet, to be honest.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then, lastly, since in the case of Peter Strzok and other statements, because this information was not made available to us at a time in which your predecessor, Mr. Comey, specifically said he was breaking precedent and being open and transparent as to the investigation of Hillary Clinton's
what you need, boss? Some wheels? I can bring them around.
Documents under the Federal Records Act and classified documents.
I'll bring it to you.
Do you agree that a de novo review at some point by someone is clearly warranted as to whether or not the decision not to prosecute was appropriate?
Well, Congressman, I think what I would say to that is there is what I would consider a de novo outside independent review by the Inspector General into whether or not decisions made, including charging or not charging decisions in the matter that you're referring to, were based on any kind of improper considerations or political considerations. And depending on what the Inspector General finds, there could be any range of possible steps that we or others would have to take in response to those findings.
So it's not a de novo review by the Inspector General, but a review of whether or not impropriety occurred, and as such a de novo review of that decision not to prosecute Hillary Clinton would be the question.
The time of the gentleman has expired. I think the director may answer the question.
Yeah, I think I can briefly respond, which is I think of the Inspector General's investigation as de novo in one sense, which is that it's objective, arm's length, no skin in the game, if you will. But you're right that the Inspector General is not second-guessing prosecutorial decisions and things like that. However, the Inspector General is looking at the very important question of whether or not improper political considerations factored into the decision-making. If he were to conclude that that's what happened, then I think at that point we're in a situation where we have to assess what else might need to be done to unring that bell, if you will.
Thank you. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. I welcome you, Director, and I thank you for your service. I'm holding in my hand right now the mission of the FBI, which reads, the mission of the FBI is to protect and defend the United States against terrorists and foreign intelligence threats, to uphold and enforce the criminal laws of the United States, and to provide leadership and criminal justice services the federal, state, municipal, and international agencies and partners, and to perform these responsibilities in a manner that is responsive to the needs of the public and is faithful to the Constitution of the United States. Do you adhere to that mission?
Yes, ma'am.
Does that mission include your responding to the political bias and comments of politicians?
I do not think it is part of my responsibility to respond to opinions and biases, if there are out there, by politicians.
And forgive me for the time period that I have. If Director Comey made a statement that there would be no prosecution against the former Secretary of State, would that statement have been reviewed by the Department of Justice?
Well, Congresswoman, I think that that whole decision making was handled is part of what the Inspector General is looking at.
Is that the protocol? You indicated that you report to the Deputy Attorney General, he reports to the Attorney General. And so, in the normal protocol, the statement that you would have made, or any other FBI director would have made, Director Mueller, when he was the FBI director, reviewed by that protocol? Is that the likely protocol?
Likely protocol, sure.
Let me move on to indicate that it was stated earlier that the FBI, that the former secretary disclosed top secrets into emails, whether that, and asked the question whether that should be investigated. The present president disclosed top secret classified information to Russian ambassador and foreign minister in the Oval Office. Is the FBI investigating those disclosures?
Congresswoman, I wouldn't confirm or suggest the existence of any ongoing investigation.
Just a few years ago, this committee considered and eventually moved on a obstruction of justice element in an impeachment proceeding. Do you believe, yes or no, can a sitting president commit obstruction of justice?
Congresswoman, legal questions, especially legal questions regarding impeachment, are not something that I'm equipped to answer setting as an FBI director.
This is separate and apart from impeachment. Do you believe that a sitting president can commit an obstruction of justice?
That also is a legal question, and I would defer to the lawyers on that one. I'm a now reformed lawyer as an FBI
I understand. Is it your opinion
nice
that
work.
if a
Your technicians are already breaking that down.
It becomes a non-crime?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
If a sitting president commits a crime, does it become a non-crime?
Same answer.
Let me move on to the idea of the quote from the President of the United States. And do you believe that the FBI's reputation is in tatters? What impact did that have on the FBI? If you would move quickly, I know you gave a long assessment, but what impact would that have on the FBI if that is a statement made nationally and also to the world, that the FBI is in tatters?
Congresswoman, the agents, analysts, and staff of the FBI are big boys and girls. We understand that we will take criticism from all corners, and we're accustomed to that. I believe, personally, based on what I've seen, that our reputation with our counterparts in law enforcement, federal, state, and local, our counterparts in the intelligence community, our counterparts around the world, the communities that we serve, the victims that we protect, the judges we appear before, the scientists we interact with in the laboratory services space, for example. My experience has been that our reputation is quite good.
Thank you very much. I wanted to be assured to the American people that Andrew Weissman and Peter Strzok, who were removed from their posts, that will not sabotage Bob Mueller's investigation to Trump campaign's collusion with Russia. Their removal.
I'm sorry,
That their removal, Peter Strzok and Mr. Weissman, will not sabotage Mueller's investigation into Russian collusion. Their removal from the investigation.
I'm not aware of any effort by anyone to sabotage, or less even, Special Counsel Mueller's investigation.
Let me ask the question on the black identity extremists. You indicated, or we have had some conversation. Let me indicate to you that a report that was done August 14, 2017, said that during the same period of this report, they found that right-wing extremists were behind nearly twice as many incidents, 115, and just over a third of these incidents were foiled than those who might be considered Islamists or might be considered others. There is a black extremist identity report. Again, I ask the question, would you see that that report be clarified? And would you take note of the fact that the convictions dealing with violence are more for looking for my chart, are more dealing with Islamists and left wing and less for right wing. So right wing extremists are not being prosecuted. Black identity extremists, as declared by the FBI, are in fact subjected to a report, and if I might say, a FBI that is not diverse, that I know that we'd like to work on to make it diverse, but they are not being prosecuted the way right wing. Right wing has the lowest amount of prosecutions in the United States. Percent of domestic terror incidents involving federal prosecution, the right wing is the lowest. The left wing is prosecuted 100%. Can you explain that?
The time of the gentleman has expired. The director is permitted to answer the question.
Look, Congresswoman, I'd have to look at the statistics that you saw. I can tell you that we have in our domestic terrorism program, that the last time I looked, we have about 50% more white supremacist, what the category that we would call white supremacist investigations than we do in the black identity extremist category. The other point I would make is that in all of these contexts, in the domestic terrorism arena, that we only investigate if there are three things. One, federal criminal activity, credible evidence of a federal crime. Two, credible information suggesting an attempt to use force or violence. And three, those things in furtherance of a political or social goal. If we don't have that, we don't investigate. Doesn't matter whether right wing, left wing, or any other wing.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like a report back on that question, please. Thank you very much.
The gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director, for your testimony here today and your service to our country. Number of curiosities I come here with this morning.
We're good to go. Collect the product and bring it back for storage.
In the FBI interview and investigation of General Flynn, are there notes from those interviews? Do you know?
Number one, I don't know, but beyond that, I wouldn't want to comment on a ongoing investigation being run by the special counsel.
Uh-huh. And in a normal circumstance like that, would you expect there to be notes in any other case?
It is our normal practice to memorialize interviews.
And do so by notes?
Well, it usually gets reflected in an FBI, what's called an FBI 302. How agents go from the process of the spoken conversation to the 302 varies. And then there are other settings where it's a different kind of format.
When agents set someone down for that kind of interview, notes would be normal. In most cases, would there also be an audio tape recording?
Actually, I think an audio tape would be unusual.
Or a videotape would fit that same
Likewise,
category.
also unusual.
Thank you. And but you don't know whether they are available for General Flynn. I bring this up because of the interview of Hillary Clinton, and when we interviewed some of the members of the former administration that were familiar with the interview, the matter, we'll use their word in the, let's call it now, the investigation of Hillary Clinton. And we learned here in this room that there were no notes available to us, that there were no audio and no video available to us, and in fact, they had not been made available to the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, and neither had they been made available or at least reviewed by former Director Comey. And it was curious to me that a heavy decision of one of the highest investigations in the history of this country, the people who made the decision on it didn't review the materials. They just simply received the briefing of the people that they had appointed to do the investigation. I guess I'll ask you, you're going to tell me you don't have an opinion on that. Would you conduct similar investigations in a similar manner? Wouldn't that send off an alarm bell to you if that were going on within your department today?
Well, I think what I would say is that I think investigations are best conducted by taking appropriate memorialization of an interview. What I will also say is that in a particular investigation, I think your question goes to whether or not the handling of the investigation was skewed or tainted in some way by improper political considerations. And I think that's what the outside Inspector General is looking at, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he finds.
And I believe that the question's already been asked about the principals that were in the room during that investigation. And one,
Congresswoman, I think I'm not comfortable trying to discuss the specific victim engagements.
And then, lastly, since in the case of tHE and other statements, this information was not made available to us at a time when your predecessor, Comey, specifically said he was embracing the president as being open and transparent as to the investigation of Hillary Clinton, taking from government possession documents under the Federal Records Act and classified documents. Do you agree that a de novo review at some point by someone is clearly warranted as to whether or not the case is not prosecuted appropriately?
Well, Congressman, I think what I would say to that is there is what I would consider a de novo outside independent review by the Inspector General into whether or not decisions made, including charging or not charging decisions in the matters you're referring to, were based on any kind of improper considerations, political considerations. And depending on what the Inspector General finds, there could be any range of possible steps that we or others would have to take in response to those findings.
So it's not a de novo review by the Inspector General, but a review of whether or not compliance occurred as such a de novo review of that case not prosecuted or request would be requested.
The time the gentleman has expired. I think I can briefly respond, which is I think of the Inspector General's investigation as de novo once this objective, arm's length, no skin in the game, if you will. But you're right that the Inspector General is not second-guessing prosecutorial decisions and things like that. However, the Inspector General is looking at the very important question of whether or not improper political considerations factored into the decision-making. If he were to conclude that that's what happened, then I think at that point we're in a situation where we have to assess what else might need to be done to unring that bell, if you will.
Thank you. I yield back.
The Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson-Lee, for 5 minutes.
I thank the Chairman. I welcome you, Director, and I thank you for your service. I'm holding in my hand right now the mission of the FBI, which reads, the mission of the FBI is to protect and defend the United States against terrorist and foreign intelligence threats, to uphold and enforce the criminal laws of the United States, and to provide leadership in criminal justice services to federal, state, municipal, and international agencies and partners, and to perform these responsibilities in a manner that is responsive to the needs of the public and is faithful to the Constitution of the United States. Do you adhere to that mission?
Yes, ma'am.
Does that mission include your responding to the political bias and comments of politicians?
I do not think it is part of my responsibility to respond to opinions and biases, if there are out there, by politicians.
If forgive me for the time period that I have. If Director Comey made a statement that there would be no prosecution against the former Secretary of State, would that statement have been reviewed by the Department of Justice?
There's some pastors down here, you know.
Somebody
really take the some pastors down here, you know. I don't know why they always come and put that blasted trash right down there now, all of a sudden. That's the second, that's the third. First it was 2 bags. They dropped and left there. I come back tonight, there's a box there, cereal box, and in a big brown box, sitting right there.
Is that the likely protocol?
Likely protocol.
They want to get us pork out. They want to get us pork out. I'm going to handle that different and call them people.
Let me catch them.
That's what I'm saying.
Because I can't spark on anybody.
As David Van, you don't want to catch them.
Because I'm thinking that's who came and beat the door and dropped the trash. I don't know, because the trash wasn't there.
Right, but I'm like this.
Look, when you heard that sound, when I got up and went out, that's when I saw the trash. The trash wasn't there.
It wasn't there before.
It wasn't there all day.
Because like I said, that was kind of late. Yeah, I'm like I said, it had to be them or somebody. I know one thing, wasn't you.
No, it wasn't me, and I'm not moving that trash. I know Mr. David probably saw it when he came.
I'm on my hand, because I told you what happened. He heard it on the game. He said,
damn.
Because
I was asleep.
If you just saw how he looked, and then he looked at me and I said, and if I didn't know what I know, that could have given me a heart attack.
Hey, I heard it in there.
I'm trying to tell y'all all day.
I thought it was you.
Right,
something like that. Then I was like,
you know that, yeah, you say you felt that too. You felt me, because when whoever they was that did this, and when they started, it had to be a man. When he started me, I went straight to wanting to jump out my bed and go outside. I didn't want to go to the window. I wanted to go outside because I felt like, right. I felt like this. You need to be addressed, because I'm not that one. Even though I'm not that one no more, but I'm not that one to fuck with, especially when I'm not in that mood. And I wasn't in that mood. They would already not let me get on broadcast, and then he gonna bam on my door after somebody said on my TV screen, yo. It went, yo. And then about 5-10 minutes later, boom, boom, boom. That's why I was like, now I know nobody ain't playing with me off this motherfucking game. Send somebody in my motherfucking house, don't think I'm gonna react to it. Shit. And I did react to it too, because I was ready to go outside. And I said, come on, creative, what's happening with that?
I went outside with the sheet on, with nothing.
I said, come on, creative, what's up with that? And the creative said, the power of anger is not nice. When somebody that's straight get angry and ready to fight. And that's how I felt. Yeah, so it's like it's on your mind. That's it. That's what they do, these old vampire motherfuckers. They do shit to get sparks out of you, so you can bring down your beautiful vibrations to they fucking low vibrations. And I'm like shit, I'm sorry, son of a bitch.
Bitch ain't got shit to do.
Shit to do.
I'm not aware of any effort by anyone to sabotage.
I say, oh yeah, be careful, huh?
One thing, like I said again, it is what it is, what's going on. But you be a straight ass how you feel about the shit. The one thing about the divine creator gonna give you some type of intuition to move around and shit. If you ain't supposed to go outside as good as you are in tune with the creator, the tune gonna be for you not to go outside, go stay put. I'm trying to tell you, I know.
Like this lady gonna call me today. She gonna ask me, did she borrow some money?
report.
Man, you the one that got